This is Werk, which is probably my best known tune. There's a few bits in it that are particularly well known, to the point where it's often the first thing anyone says to me or sings to me if I meet them. So yeah, maybe we'll get into the sort of guts of that and what those things are. And it's many drums on this one. So the intro, maybe a cowbell. Maybe a cowbell with some snares peppered and another sort of like in fives, like a tritony smashing sound, just for a bit of impact on a downbeat. So with the intro, what have I got there? Sort of that's 32 bars of a little snare pattern interacting with this cowbell. And then bring in a second snare pattern, which just kind of increases the intensity, which is usually what you're going for with an intro and a dance record. Is, you know, you want a bit of build up. So that's building up, and continues. More snares, more build up. And then the bit that I hear a lot is a little hook that goes into the drop. I think that is really what the track hinges on, to be honest, is those two elements. I mean, there's a lot of drum chopping, but the bits that stand out, I think, are the little hook and the bass line. The hook really was heavily influenced by someone like Wiley or Jay Sweets or Danny Weed, who used a lot of like sort of folk instruments in their beats, and this is a panpipe sample that has been pitch modulated in a way that it just gives a little flicker. If I turn that off, that's it straight. And if you do a little pitch modulation on, so it flicks up a fifth and then down a little bit and then back up. And you hear that sound, not that exact sound, but that sort of pitch modulated panpipe, you hear that in loads of old Wiley beats. And there's actually a doubling of it as well, so it's tuned up a fifth instead of just one note playing at a time. So if you play, anytime I play a note, and that fifth is used a lot in Japanese music. A lot of music from around the world, like folk music from around the world, is pentatonic. I mean, there's like 5 notes in it, so you get a lot of fifths, as opposed to like 7 notes in a Western scale. So you get that fifth just has a sort of quality of music from those regions, really, which was clearly an interest to Wiley at that point in time. And then I was interested in what he was doing. And then, the ideas feed through. And then what we've got with that is just a little 3-note riff, which is I think that's like a Phrygian mode. But essentially we're in a minor scale. It's the first, second and third note of the scale, and then there's a little flattened note there as well. And then that leads into the bass line. And if you can hear, if I started from that section, you can hear the bass line doesn't actually come in on the first note, it comes in on the second beat, and the first note is the hangover of the little hook that comes in beforehand. I think that was a practical decision in this tune because the hook ended on the next bar, so it had to run over. But you hear it a lot in drum and bass, garage, grime. A lot of time you'll hear a drop and it comes in off the snare And I think that's something about it just catches you off guard a little bit. Like if you expect, you know when the first beat is coming and it's not there. And if there's something satisfying in place of it, which in this case is like the resolution of the hook, it just works. It just works. I don't know, it makes your brain dance around a little bit. That's the sort of focal moment of this tune. And then the bass line, similarly, it's very simple. It's three notes. The notes I'm playing, it's the first, third, and the fifth. So like basically, if you played any basic chord on a piano, those are the notes you play. But that's what the bass line's made out of. It goes like first, third. Really basic. But I find in a bass line, the simpler the better usually. The more you can pare it down, the more impact it's going to have. And the sound itself is essentially basically just a sine wave, much like in fives. This has been hard clipped a little bit. You can see the edges have come off. And the sound that just gives it a little bit more edge. There's some extra frequencies in there rather than just the very bottom one. And then most of the rest of the tune is really the interaction between that hook and the bass line. And like in fives, there's call and response thing going in. When the bass line stops, the hook comes in and fills in. So there's like a little conversation going on. And most of the development of this tune is from the breaks. So the breaks are a lot more chopped up than fives. And it's peppered with a lot of little like vocal chops and that cowbell that was used in the intro. So I try and keep like elements to a tune quite minimal, but then just try and reintroduce them where I can. Just to give a bit of continuity throughout the tune. So if something appears in the intro, I try and like reincorporate it back later on into the tune. And there's a lot of like switching, chopping, and how I'll usually do that is, so this is a finished project, but usually I'll have loads of patterns as I'm writing. And what I'll do, you can see me doing this throughout the video, but I can skip between patterns. And I can sort of chop things together. So if I have loads of different patterns with different ideas in, I can on the fly chop between one another and just experiment and see what happens when I smashing different patterns together. And usually that's how I'll find the structure to a song. It's just to chop here, chop there, find elements that work well together. And then when I hear one that works or I like, I'll then copy that across and then write that into the tune. And that's the process used a lot in this track, because there's a lot of little chops and like just bringing in little slices of elements. And there's not a full-on breakdown in this tune, but I've just gone for like a drum switch. So there's a different drum breakbeat brought in here. The bass line switches up. And again, more pitching of the drums. So this is one thing a tracker is good for. So obviously with the grid, everything is one line at a time. So you can go in, and each of these lines is a 30-second beat, so they play fast. So that almost becomes a tone in itself. And that's something I like playing with quite a lot. Like a pattern can become a tonal element. And I've used that quite a bit in this tune. So this section, there's like a deviation in the time signature. So I go into like triplets. So most drum and bass jungle music's in 4/4, and the vast majority of my music is. But these fills have stretched out the notes, so we're playing triplets. And then again here. Which again is just another way of like introducing different rhythms and like different like texture into the rhythm. Because again, this track, most of the movement that's happened is just in the way the breaks have been chopped. And that's just another way of doing it. I mean, you could go mad with it and go into all kinds of mad type signatures if you want to go Venetian snares with it, but like the triplets are about as far as I've gone. So I'll just try to work out how many breaks we've got there. So I think mainly we've got this one, which again quite chopped, roughly chopped, and they're looped in like a ping pong loop, which means they loop back, and they don't just loop forward all the way through; they loop backwards and forwards. So it gives it a sort of, if I was going to do it more smoothly, you can kind of create this tonal tail, but I've done it quite rough because that works. But what that does is it lets you, it just gives you a little bit, obviously that slice of audio is a certain length, and if I want to make it sound longer than it is, it doubles the length of time you've got to play with. So you can it's one way of stretching out the tails on the sound a little bit. But I think it's just a chopped and looped. There's no other real processing going on there. But then there's alternation is going on. And this is the nice thing about trackers as well. You can have more than one instrument on one channel. So we've also got this break, which is just a snare, actually. It's an aim and snare with, there's a reverb tail that I've added into the sample and a flanger, and that I'm using just to like pepper in some different tones. And a lot of what's going on here as well, you see these yellow numbers, these are like your volume levels basically. So each hit has a volume level, and you can create rolls like a drummer hitting the drum at different volumes. On Ableton it'd be your velocity, you'd have a little fader for it, and you draw that in. But that's a lot of texture in like sort of jungle drum and bass from mid-90s. That was one of the main devices she would use. Yeah, so most of that section is just the alternation between those two different snares. But I mean, there's enough there to work with. Like, I could probably make the tune 8 minutes long if I wanted to, but 4.5's enough. It's enough. And again, a lot of the focal points are around transitions. So like things often build to a sort of crescendo, and then there's a release with like the end of the phrase leading into next section. And then I think there's a third break. Yeah, the break that I use in the breakdown I've reintroduced in this part. Again, that's just the snare. I know what I've done the same process here where I've put reverb on the tail of it just to give it more tone. And a bit of echo just to fill the space out. So I do this quite a lot. This is that is comb filter, which, like I was saying earlier, you can do it with a delay, or you can do it with a flanger as well. But this is presented as a comb filter here, and I've got it set to randomize. So every time I hit this key, oh no, I haven't got it. I've got it set to key track. So if I play this drum up the keyboard, the comb filter follows it. So like the drum sample itself is playing at the same pitch, but there's like a second tone behind it. There's the comb filter sort of resonating over it. And again, that I've used just to add more movement with the same snare sample. It's just another way you can introduce a tonal quality to a percussive sound to then play around with, basically.